As great as a Nintendo Switch may be, I think that all of us would agree that 2020's easily been the least impressive year as far as new games are concerned, and I'm sure the reason for that's because of that dang PBR virus. But while that does mean that we should give Nintendo a little bit of wiggle room and not freak out over game delays and fewer releases, it is worth considering that the above-average sized den just might be using this pandemic as the perfect excuse to hold off on releasing some of their heavy hitters. Why on earth would they do that, you ask? Well, sit back in your Step Pepper's most comfortable chair, press the subscribe button if you haven't already, and allow me, Skynet's biggest threat, Cameron all one word, to tell you why Nintendo may be consciously holding back on releasing their best Switch games for the immediate future. Alright, so at the time of this recording, I'm really not sure if Nintendo's got any secret weapons planned for the near future, but unlike half the people on the internet, I'm pretty sure they're gonna come out with something decent over the next few months besides Pikmin 3. But even so, my full-grown men's intuition's telling me that it's just not gonna be in the same league as Breath of the Wild, Smash, or new Pokemon games. If we ended up getting Mario Odyssey 2 or a new Mario Kart or something like that, then feel free to berate me in the comments about how this video hasn't aged very well, but I've gotta say that I'm really not expecting anything groundbreaking, even though I really do think that Nintendo could probably make it happen if they wanted to. I mean, as soon as the pandemic first hit, Nintendo made it pretty clear that there were going to be some delays and that we shouldn't expect too much out of 2020, and I'm really not saying that it was a lie or anything like that, since Masahiro Sakurai, aka Uncle Saki, showed us that he was working on the Smash Ultimate DLC from his home along with the rest of his crew. And I'd imagine that this poor guy wants to finish this game as soon as possible so he can take a friggin' nap, and I really doubt that he wanted the entire internet to see his living room either. However, even though Nintendo did in fact have a completely valid reason to slow their flow of games down at the start of the pandemic, I'm still skeptical that a company with this much money and resources couldn't have gotten a lid on things by now. I mean, I'm well aware of the fact that Japan shut things down a lot sooner than most other countries in the world, but they also got things under control a lot faster as well, and not to be a ween or anything, but honestly, how much time did they really even lose? Even though it feels like 74,000 years, the pandemic's really only been going on for a few months, and Nintendo's absolutely still been working, albeit a little less conveniently than normal. And given that their games usually don't have massive day one updates or anything like that, I'd peg them to be the type of company that have most of their titles finished ahead of time, so to go this long without anything new just seems kinda insane to me, especially when Sony and Microsoft have been showing off all kinds of games for 2020, although to be fair, there is a good chance that some of these games were being saved for the launch of the next console generation. As we all know, Animal Crossing New Horizons came out right at the start of the pandemic, and seeing as how we got Paper Mario and the Origami King in June, we can't exactly say that there haven't been any new first-party games, but even if it was a proven fact that Nintendo's been hoarding games, I doubt they'd try to get away with not releasing anything new without blowing their cover. And honestly, if they've got to put one game out, then something as polarizing as Origami King makes the most sense, because first of all, the fact that they intentionally kept the first trailer vague means that they knew damn well that the game would be polarizing. But even though Paper Mario fans are frustrated at Nintendo for not bringing the classic style back from the Thousand Year Door, they'd still buy it in 2020, because at this point, anybody who owns a Switch is just way too thirsty and desperate to resist any new first-party titles. But obviously, all my wild speculation that Nintendo's consciously hoarding Switch games begs the question of why the frig they'd ever even do that in the first place. Man, after all, Nintendo loves money enough to take games off of the Wii U's eShop and resell them on the Switch for triple the price, so why would they not want to release new games on the Switch and make even more money during a global pandemic where people are playing video games more than ever? Well, because as much money as Nintendo makes off of software sales, they stand to make even more money when they release a game that's so good that it causes people to buy hardware, and with the PBR virus absolutely slowing the Switch's production down, they're still pretty hard to find all these months later given that they're made in Vietnam and China, as opposed to all the software developers who are in Japan where things are fairly under control. Again, I'm not saying that the software development's completely unaffected by the pandemic and that everything at Nintendo HQ is just running completely normally. In fact, I even snuck into Japan myself to spy on them just to be completely sure, and there's no doubt about it, Nintendo's software development's definitely not running as smoothly as usual. But all I'm saying is that I can totally see why Nintendo wouldn't want to release new software when they really don't even have to. I mean, the Switch's 2020 lineup was definitely pretty weak, but even so, Animal Crossing was the absolute perfect game that came out at just the right time, which ended up making Nintendo over $1 billion in profit, so the company's not exactly hurting right now by any means. And while more killer apps would definitely make more money in the short term, I think they'd actually make even more in the long term if they held off until hardware was more readily available, because like I said, new software sells new hardware, and all the people who buy new hardware are most likely going to buy more than one game. However, if all the good software comes out now while new Switches are still hard to come by, then all these games are going to be old news by the time they're readily available. And look, I can't stress enough that I'm not stating any of this as absolute fact, and that it's very possible that Nintendo's game drought's just a result of them taking extra safety precautions during the pandemic, or really even just adapting to it poorly. But one way or another, I guess we're gonna find out sooner or later, especially now that Switches are starting to become more readily available. But if you ask me, I'd say that if we start seeing heavy hitters like Breath of the Wild 2 or a new Hotel Mario being pelted at us back-to-back once the Switch's production's completely back to normal, then I'd feel pretty confident in saying that Nintendo is definitely holding out. But if it takes them forever to get software back on track once the hardware starts flowing, then I'd say that it's fair to call me a crazy conspiracy theorist with a small pee-pee. Regardless of why the Switch has been going through such a drought, though, I just hope that we can play some new first-party games in the near future. But like I said before, I'm not sweating it one bit, because Nintendo's already flat-out said that there's more directs coming this year, and even if they turn out to be underwhelming, I still need more time to get through my backlog of games anyway, so I'm really not going to stress it one way or another. But anyway, what do you think? Is it even possible that Nintendo's milking the pandemic excuse and waiting to release these new games until Switches are more readily available? Or do you think that I'm some kind of nutcase who needs to be locked up right next to George Clooney? Either way, let me know what you think in the comments down below, and as always, I'll try my goddamnedest to respond to everybody at some point. Let me tell you, if there's two people who could easily cure the coronavirus once and for all, then it would definitely be today's patrons of the day, Austin Garcia and Jiznoof. If you want to be badasses like these two, then consider supporting FU Game Crew on Patreon for loot boxes and silly rewards in the mail. Send pictures or videos of you rocking merch if you want to make cameos in my videos, and follow me on Twitch if you ever want to hang out whenever I play video games sometimes. My name's Cameron, all one word, and I'll see you next time.
So I want to say thank you to your loyalty, thank you for your support.